There is something most men refuse to look at, a truth so simple that it seems absurd, yet so brutal that it destroys their identity without them realizing it. Something that redefines how women choose, reject, and feel attracted. We see it every day, but almost no one understands it. Are you ready to hear what your ego doesn't want to accept?
Your problem was never what you say. It was what you communicate before you speak. What if attractiveness didn't depend on your personality, but on the mental state you project without noticing? What if your attempt to please didn't demonstrate value, but neediness? What if women chose by instinct before choosing by logic? Evolutionary psychologist David Buss revealed something that made thousands of men uncomfortable. His study didn't become controversial because of what it showed, but because of what it exposes in the male soul. Seduction does not happen while you speak, but before. It is not defined by your words, but by your psychological posture. It does not depend on your intentions, but on your internal structure. Female attraction, as Schopenhauer pointed out, is not born from conscious reasoning, but from a dark, blind, biological will that seeks signals of power. The average man believes he wins love with kindness, with displays of interest, with explicit goodness. But by trying to prove what he's worth, he reveals the opposite, emotional hunger. Nietzsche already warned that the man who needs to be accepted becomes a slave to the gaze of others. And emotional slavery is the first scent the female instinct detects. The problem is not lacking value, the problem is trying to prove it. But it's what happens when the mind stops obeying desire. Most men enter an interaction with women seeking to be seen, validated, chosen. In that instant, they've already lost. Because whoever seeks to be chosen unconsciously communicates that he has no options. And whoever has no options transmits low social survival, as Buss explains. The female instinct does not translate this as poor man, but as man without relevance. Thus the paradox arises. The more you try to demonstrate your value, the more you destroy it. The more interest you show, the more you reveal lack. The more emotional energy you give, the more you place yourself in inferiority. And psychological inferiority seduces no instinct that seeks protection, direction, and stability. Nietzsche would call this submission disguised as courtesy. Here lies the silent error of the modern man. He confuses desire with direction, intention with presence, words with psychological status. Attraction is not a dialogue, it is a reading of power. Men believe women seek personality, charisma, conversation, chemistry. But evolutionary psychology and social neurology show something else. Women interpret unconscious signals of inner leadership in seconds. They look at your posture, your breathing, your body rhythm, the stability of your gaze. They are not looking for what you want. They are looking for where you want it from. Are you ready to hear truths that hurt? Type control if you're ready. What Buss called micro-behaviors, Jung described as archetypal energy of the self that positions itself in the world. It's not a gesture, it's not a technique, it's not a phrase. It's the way your body occupies space. It's your absence of hurry. It's the silence that doesn't make you uncomfortable. It's the conversation that isn't used to ask for something, but to express something. And here comes a brutal revelation. The body always betrays your intention. If you come seeking approval, the body communicates it before the mouth. If you come seeking validation, your energy shrinks. If you come trying to impress, your gestures speed up. Your shoulders drop slightly, your breathing becomes shallow. The female instinct reads this with millimetric precision, long before you can seem interesting. Robert Greene called it silent power. Machiavelli called it strength at rest. Nietzsche called it affirmation of being. Body language is not a posture, it is a consequence. What if true power wasn't in dominating others, but in dominating the impulse to be loved? The man who doesn't master his impulse to be desired becomes a slave to the desire of others. He lives reacting, he speaks to convince. He gives attention to receive crumbs. He thinks seduction is about saying something special, when in reality seduction is what happens before saying anything. Women respond first to energy, not to content. They respond to rhythm, not discourse. They respond to psychological status, not friendliness. Friendliness without emotional authority is interpreted as submission, and submission at the instinctive level reduces attraction. Not because the woman wants a tyrant, but because instinct seeks security. Jung explained that the feminine seeks energetic containment, not aggressive domination, but the force capable of holding chaos. The man who overflows, who agitates, who accelerates, who needs attention, who needs approval, who needs to be noticed, communicates imbalance, and imbalance scares the instinct. An overflowing man cannot contain anything or anyone. A needy man cannot lead even his own impulse. Schopenhauer expressed it with irony. Uncontrolled desire is a form of servitude. That's why when you enter with explicit intention to conquer, you lose. Entering with desire is different from entering with direction. Entering seeking results is different from entering expressing presence. When your identity depends on her response, she becomes your judge, and your body reveals it. Your energy stops communicating "I am" and starts communicating "Am I enough?" What if fear were the most common disguise of desire? The fear of not being chosen creates anxious movements. The fear of losing attention makes you talk too much. The fear of not impressing makes you exaggerate gestures. And each attempt to impress her places you beneath her. This is the invisible tragedy. Men destroy themselves trying to please. Buss revealed in his studies that female attraction comes from signals of implicit value, not explicit. A woman doesn't want you to tell her why you're valuable. She wants to feel it without you saying it. She wants your presence to force her to read you. She wants to understand you through small details you're not trying to show. A man who tries to impress communicates emptiness. A man who expresses without needing communicates abundance. And here is the key men ignore. Abundance is not having money, success, or beauty. It is not needing approval to exist. This is biology, not abstract philosophy. When your mind rests, your energy occupies space. When your identity doesn't depend on others, posture stabilizes. When your breath doesn't seek correction, the body moves with unconscious elegance. Nietzsche would call this the master morality, the being who exists because he doesn't need to justify himself. What happens when a man stops seeking approval and starts observing? The body changes. The gaze becomes calm. Posture settles effortlessly. Gestures slow down. Conversation becomes consequence, not strategy. At that point, your presence begins to do the work. You don't seduce. The environment adapts to how you exist within it. This is the beginning of what Buss called discrete social dominance. It's not aggression. It's not imposition. It's not noise. It is internal clarity. Soft dominance is born from the man who belongs to himself. This man provokes a different kind of attention, not the attention that asks for something, but the attention that generates something. Not the begging attention, but the evoked attention. A woman doesn't observe him because he tries to be observed, but because his presence forces her to interpret him. He doesn't demonstrate value. He lets value become a question. And anything that needs to be deciphered becomes more attractive than what is shown out of necessity. What if silence said more than 1,000 words? When a man controls the beginning, he stops reacting to feminine stimuli. When he controls his rhythm, he doesn't speed up in the presence of beauty. When he controls his energy, he doesn't become anxious in the presence of desire. This man stops being just another man trying to conquer. He becomes an enigma. And the enigma activates one of the most powerful instincts of female psychology, selective curiosity. The man who needs attention loses it. The man who does not need attention receives it. This is not mysticism. It is social neuroscience. It is evolutionary psychology. It is philosophy applied to biology. Power is born from internal control, not external effort. As Machiavelli said, the effect matters more than the intention. In evolutionary seduction, the battle is not in what you do, but in what your body communicates without asking permission. Buss's experiment on microdominance opened a dark door, but the true abyss appears when analyzing what he called selection by option. It is not only about how you behave around a woman, but how your life is organized away from her. Attraction is not born in the encounter, but in the identity. What you project when you're not trying to project anything. The woman evaluates not only you, but the world that accompanies you. She looks for signals of movement, purpose, direction, emotional independence. Instinctively, she interprets whether you are part of a life that advances or a man parked, waiting to be chosen. And here emerges the brutal difference between the man with options and the man with emotional hunger. The first one lives, the second one waits. The first offers presence, the second gives neediness. The first decides. The second pleads. What happens when love becomes a form of control? Women are not attracted to men who seem available for any female attention. Instinct interprets that availability as low social selection. A man who accepts any crumb reveals lack of standards, lack of life, lack of criteria. A man's value is perceived in the quality of what he chooses, not in the quantity of what he desires. And this is not superficiality, it is survival. Buss proved it in multiple studies. The female instinct associates options with the capacity for social survival. The man who is desired by others does not need to prove value. His value is already validated by the environment. That's why a man with purpose does not chase female attention. His energy is occupied building something. The man with emotional hunger lives to be seen. The man with purpose lives because he has vision. Nietzsche warned that the man without direction becomes a servant to the last impulse that shakes him. A man dominated by his desire is nothing but a sophisticated slave. His attraction is not born from his power, but from his need. And neediness is one of the most repulsive forms of human behavior because it always demands more than it offers. What if true power wasn't in dominating others, but in dominating the impulse to be loved? Emotional independence becomes attractive not because it makes you cold, but because it makes you selective. A woman does not want to be your only option. She wants to be the chosen option. Female desire intensifies when it perceives that your attention has weight, that your time has value, that your presence is not given away randomly. Scarcity creates perception of value, not through manipulation, but through biological reality. This leads us to the most powerful rule of psychology applied to seduction: controlled scarcity. Controlled scarcity is not indifference. It is not ignoring. It is not disappearing. It is not manipulating. It is measuring your presence as a valuable resource. You appear, but you don't surrender. You are available, but not accessible. You listen, but you don't empty yourself. You reveal, but you don't explain yourself. You exist in her life, but your life does not revolve around her. You maintain your direction, and if she wants to join, she must walk at the rhythm you already have. That rhythm is not imposed. It is inhabited. It does not come from acting. It comes from having something in motion. Buss described this phenomenon as high-status implicit attractiveness. The man who is already on a path doesn't need to convince. His path convinces. His life justifies him. His energy explains him. When a man stops chasing, the woman begins to interpret. When a man stops begging, the woman begins to evaluate. When a man stops trying to be interesting, he becomes interesting. What happens when a man stops seeking approval and starts observing? Everything changes. His posture changes. His silence changes. His time changes. And the woman changes the way she looks at him. She stops asking herself, "Does he want something with me?" and starts asking, "Do I have something to do with him?" Seduction is not in the desire you awaken in yourself, but in the desire you awaken in her, and it does not awaken through words, but through presence. From this emerges an ability that separates common men from irresistible men: responsive dominance. The University of Rochester in 2017 confirmed it. Women find more attractive the men with balance between firmness and social sensitivity. It is not aggression. It is not arrogance. It is not demands. It is direction with awareness. It is presence with listening. It is internal control with calibrated interaction. The man who dominates responds without hurry. The man who dominates listens more than he talks. The man who dominates does not seek to convince. He creates context. Here appears the most precise technique in advanced seduction: the rule of 3 movements. Before speaking, a man with psychological status reads 3 factors. Her posture. Is she open, defensive, receptive, accelerated? The energy of the environment, relaxed, competitive, intimate, chaotic? The purpose of the moment: is it a moment to observe, to connect, to approach? When you anticipate this before acting, you never arrive out of place. You don't enter asking for emotional permission. You enter adapted. And strategic adaptation is perceived as social intelligence, one of the most powerful signals of psychological status. You don't need to dominate the environment. You only need not to be dominated by it. This precision turns your presence into real value. You are not interesting for what you say. You are interesting because you read. You don't attract through intention. You attract through clarity. Robert Greene would say that in every human encounter, whoever regulates the rhythm controls the narrative. That is silent power. That is soft dominance. What happens when love becomes a form of control? Many men believe women test them to humiliate them. Wrong. Women test to confirm if your stability is real or an act. If you lose stability during a test, your structure reveals itself as weak. If you try to explain yourself, convince, justify, you've already submitted. A man who justifies himself loses status. A man who stands firm becomes interesting. The feminine test is not judgment, it is selection. It is not attack, it is evaluation. It is not cruelty, it is biology. The woman is calibrating whether she can trust your emotional stability, whether the security she perceives in your presence comes from a character or from a real internal structure. Therefore, the man who reacts with anxiety loses. The man who responds with clarity wins. The man who defends himself becomes small. The man who observes becomes big. Self-control is perceived as status. Jung would explain that the feminine seeks the masculine energy capable of containing chaos without becoming chaos. Nietzsche would say, the superior man is the one who can sustain his form. Bass would call it high reproductive value, emotional stability. But they all speak of the same thing. Whoever controls himself becomes worthy of trust. And trust is the deepest form of attraction. The difference between an attractive man and an invisible man is not how much he pursues, but how much he belongs to himself. That's why the final technique that summarizes the entire psychology of attraction is simple. The effect of controlled scarcity. It is not absence, it is measured presence. It is not indifference, it is direction. It is not a tactic, it is identity. When your energy is measured like something valuable, women compete for it. When your time is not free, your presence gains weight. When your attention is not abundant, it becomes precious. A woman does not chase what she already has. She chases what she must decipher. That creates real magnetism, instinctive, beyond logic. Like a flame does not burn out of need, but out of nature. The attractive man does not chase the fire. He is the fire. He does not agitate himself to gain attention. Attention happens because he burns without asking permission. As Machiavelli said, whoever controls his own rhythm controls the stage, and whoever controls the stage does not need to beg for respect or love. Female attraction, as we've seen, is not born from speech, but from presence. It does not depend on technique, but on structure. It is not won through effort, but evoked through direction. A woman does not choose the most anxious, but the clearest. Not the one who tries the most, but the one who needs the least. Not the one who seduces, but the one who exists with purpose. In the end, everything comes down to this simple and devastating philosophical truth. Whoever masters his mind masters the world. And whoever does not master himself lives enslaved to his desire.